So again, you can kind of see we've been creeping up until we got to T5 with the wattage. With all the different technologies that we've been using, and certainly we have gotten much more intense light, but we're burning up more and more watts with it along the way until we got to T5. T5 is the first one that we've actually been able to cut back and actually been technically more efficient. And I just charted it out for you so you can kind of see where we're going. So that kind of leads us up to LEDs. So the first LEDs we saw in the hobby were the moonlights. And these early versions, they weren't particularly powerful. To me, they were more gimmick than anything. You could barely tell that they were on in the middle of the night. They kind of gave a little twinkle of blue here and there. But your room had to be pretty darn dark. If you had room lights on, you really couldn't see much of anything with these on. But the thing was, they were popular. From a manufacturing standpoint, you couldn't launch a fixture in the US that didn't include moonlights and have it move off the shelf. It became, the market said, we demand these moonlights, which was good for us, because that's what the people wanted, and it pushed the industry to do a better and better job. So we kept getting more and more LEDs, stronger LEDs. The LED market in general, from a commercial standpoint for lighting places like this and street lights, also was developing, and now you see them in televisions and everything else. So that has made a lot of LEDs that, quite frankly, even as moonlights, are really, really bright. You can see, here's a picture. This is Joe Yayula's, one of his tanks at the Atlantis Aquarium. It's something around 2,000 gallons. And it's got some blue LEDs on at night. It's not many. It's 30 watts of LEDs on this 2,000-ish gallon aquarium. So it's pretty bright, shows off some nice stuff at night. It's an attractive thing for at night for events they have there. But the fish are active. Here's a marsh idol here. Here's another one swimming around. They like it. They're up and awake, and they're not starting to calm down. They're not going into a hiding spot. They're up and about. So you really don't want to run these 24/7 because you got to give your fish and your coral some downtime. But they do make some phenomenal colors. You can see, even if I jump back, this is a close-up of these bubble tips, which they got to be 3-4 feet underwater. And the colors that these LEDs bring out are truly fantastic. Even this little green guy that's all the way at the bottom is glowing very nicely. So I wanted to see where we are in relation to the other things. Like I said, I'm interested in actually getting substantially more efficient. Are we able to put a significant amount of light in our tank and actually save us serious wattage on these new full LED fixtures? So I bought myself a par meter, which I've had for a number of years, and I actually love it. Actually, anybody here have a par meter? Anybody? It's a good number. It's a good number of group. They're the funnest toy I have as far as aquarium keeping. I thoroughly recommend them. The price is not too terrible. It's about $300. If you have an iPhone app where you can turn your lights off right here in your aquarium and you don't have a par meter, shame on you. You should spend that money on a par meter so that you can know when to change your bulbs, know how much brighter your light is when you do change your bulbs. So I did put the little note in there at the bottom about Dana Riddle. Dana compared this Apogee par meter, this model, to a Lycor meter, which is the one Sanjay uses. And when it's turned into sun mode, it's actually very close in par, in readings, between this and the Lycor meter. Now, the big difference is the Lycor meter will actually tell you the spectrum, and you'll see the spectral chart too. This doesn't. It gives you just the total numbers. So you don't get an idea what the spectrum is. You just get the total amount of usable light that a coral can use. But it's a nice thing to compare and contrast. So one of the other things I wanted to look at, and it's very useful for what Sanjay's doing, he tests all his lights in air at various depths. And air's great because air's the same. Day in and day out, it's never any different. But I was curious as how it compared in water. So I ran my tests and the lights that I tested in water. Now the downside is I really can't get another light fixture and repeat this test and compare them back here, because I can't be sure that the water I have today is the same clarity as the water I used then. So I had to do all my tests all at the same time with the same amount of water. And what I simply did is I took a standard 20-gallon aquarium, filled it up so that there was 12 inches of water over the top of the par meter, and then I drew a grid underneath on the bottom of the tank, marking off every 2 inches. So I have this big grid down there that I then would just place the meter at, take my hand away, let it settle, and then take a reading. So it's a grid that's 12 by 6, so that is 72 readings. And I did 3 different fixtures, so that's 216. So it's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot. And I did it all at night, because I wanted to make sure there wasn't any ambient light. So I started at 10 o'clock at night. I finished about 2 or something ridiculous. Because it takes a while. The other thing I looked at, I just threw on a little watt meter. Picked that up at Home Depot, cost like 20 bucks. Just to get a ballpark idea where I was. So these are the fixtures I looked at. I looked at James was kind enough to provide me with some ACAN light fixtures. I looked at their 2 12-inch fixtures, the 101 and the 103. And I also looked at a generic, a friend of mine in the club had some eBay special 70-watt double-ended fixture he bought, and he had a 10,000K Ushio lamp in it. The Ushio bulb had 4 months worth of light on it, so it was well broken in, but not junk either. So the first one I looked at was the 103. There's 42 LEDs in here, and runs at claimed 50 watts. So took all my readings here. The little watt meter I used said 48 watts. And I should also give you a little disclaimer here. Whether or not that watt meter is accurate, I have no idea of telling. It's plus or minus some degree of error. The same thing with the par meter. The par meter is some degree of error as well. So, don't get too uptight about my numbers versus Sanjay's, even your own numbers. You setting it up in water is going to be different than the way you have it mounted, whatever, but they should be comparable amongst the ones I did, because I did all the same water, and my user error is about the same. So you can see there's a hot spot here about 220 under 12 inches of water, and a low spot's way on the outside is 46. And I had the XL charted, and the weird thing about the XL is it actually flipped it when it charted and showed the hot spot up here. So I don't know what I did wrong when highlighting and clicking or whatever, but it kind of flipped it. So I wanted to point that out in case somebody else noticed it. But that's it. I mean, it threw some good light. Well over anything over 100 is usable light. So for a little 12-inch model, 100's out here. So on this 2-foot tank, you got over 100 on everything but the outside. So that's some very strong, usable light over the better part of that tank. And you would have probably gotten a bigger fixture anyhow for a 2-foot display. I also looked at their 101 model, which is it is sold as a lower intensity light fixture. It had a labeled draw of 35 watts. And actually, I don't have written down. James, how many LEDs are in the 101 per foot? 157? Okay. Oh, that's a lot. Did the same thing, took readings all along, all over the tank. This was much more uniform, whereas the other fixture had, a definite hot spot in the middle. This was much more uniform throughout. It was about 40 to 50 something all across. And it was actually a very broad spread. And again, when I charted it out, you can see it. It's, it lit up the whole bottom. 40 is, lower light. You're going to keep lower intensity stuff, your soft corals, your recordias, things like that aren't real light hogs. But it's a very able light. Now, the one weird thing, it was a little bit higher on my meter, 42 than 35. Whether or not that's significant or not, I don't know. Again, they're little cheap things. I mean, they're plus or minus a certain percentage. And here's the generic 70-watt double-ended fixture that I borrowed. Now, even though it's a 70-watt fixture, it's actually labeled to draw 75 watts, which I thought was kind of strange. Again, plugged it in, repeated the tests. It measured 73 watts out of the wall, and it definitely had like the hot spot you'd see from a lot of Sanjay's data when you see it charted. This sort of like double here. A lot of the double endeds that he does, because of the reflector design, makes two like weird bands. But it was mostly, for 70 watts, it was about 80 at its hot spot, got down